So far in trigonometry, we've looked at finding various sides of triangles. What we're now going to look at is if I know some of the sides, I want to be able to find some of the angles in the triangle. Now, obviously, one of them's pretty easy because it's a right angle. The other two angles, we want to be able to find. So if I know one of the other angles, then I can find the other one easily because we know angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. But we need to find one of them first before we can go any further. So if I know two of the sides of the triangle, and it's a right angled triangle, then we can also use these trig ratios to find the angle. And what we need to do here is we need to do the backwards version of sine, cosine, and tangent. So when we do the reverse, okay, or if we're going backwards, that's called an inverse. So if I'm doing the inverse of something, it means that I'm doing the opposite. If I'm doing the inverse of an addition, it's a subtraction. The inverse of a square is a square root. So when we do the opposite of sine, cosine, and tangent, it's called the inverse sine, inverse cosine, and inverse tangent. Okay, so those are the words that we use. When we write these out, we write them as sine with a little minus one, so like a power, cos with the minus one, and a tan with the minus one. In Year 11 and Year 12, we'll also have another type of notation, which is arc sine. Okay, so it's just like putting the word arc in front of sine, means exactly the same thing as the sine minus 1. Arc cos and arc tan. The nice thing about these notation is that you don't have this little power, because sometimes powers can get a bit confusing. But we're going to stick with the minus 1 notation for now. Later on, we will see it, and we will use that when we get to Year 11 and Year 12. In order to get these operations on the calculator, what we do is we first press the shift button on the calculator, so that's the yellow button, and then we press sine, cos, and tan. So if you look above the sine, cos, and tan buttons, you will see that there is the sine minus 1, cos minus 1, and tan minus 1. So that's where they come from. So how we go to solve these sorts of problems, usually what it is we've got a question where we don't know what the angle is, but we know the fraction or the value of the trig component. So if I've been given cos of alpha, okay, so that's an alpha Greek letter, is equal to 4 over 7, so that's like your adjacent over hypotenuse, that's your fraction, then if I want to find alpha, it's kind of like undoing the cosine, but when you undo cosine, it's cos minus 1. And then we can put this in brackets, 4 over 7. So when I undo the cos, it becomes a cos minus 1 on the other side. So when you put this into your calculator, you're going to press shift, cos, and then you're going to put the fraction in, 4 over 7. I think if you don't put the close bracket in, I think it still works. So you can just click equals there. And what you'll get is 55.15 degrees. The question says to the nearest degree, so we just need to round that off to the nearest whole number. So 55.15, closest whole number is 55 degrees. With our next question, we've got tan of x. So there's our pronumeral. Okay, and that's what we're looking for. So x equals tan minus 1 of 3.754. Okay, so sometimes the value might be given as a decimal. Sometimes it could be given as a fraction. Okay, so we just need to put it into your calculator that way. So for this one, tan, we're going to go shift tan 3.754 equals, we get 75.0837 something degrees. Nearest whole number is 75 degrees. With our next example, find the size of the missing angle correct to the nearest minute. Okay, so this is where all that angle stuff we did in our second lesson of trig, of the actual trig, sort of comes into play. So we're looking at this triangle here. So if we're looking at a triangle, first thing we're going to do is label the hypotenuse, opposite and adjacent sides. So there's our hypotenuse, line through the middle, that's opposite, and the remaining side is adjacent. So for this question, we're given the hypotenuse value, the opposite value. So if I've got opposite and hypotenuse, that's going to be sine. Okay, so ka toa. So sine of the angle, so that's a theta. Okay, remember that's a Greek letter that we use for angles often. Sine theta equals, and the fraction is 9/13. If we want to find the angle, then we undo the sign, so sine -1 of 9/13. Put that in your calculator, so shift sine 9/13, and that's 43.813 something. Now, because we want this answer to the nearest minute, once you've pressed your equals, you're going to press the bubble button, okay, your degree button, and it'll change your answer into degrees, minutes, and seconds. So those are the values. So if I need to round this to the nearest minute, what I need to do is I'm going to keep the degrees, minutes, and I need to check the seconds. So it's 47 seconds. That's greater than halfway because halfway is 30. So we need to make sure that our minutes needs to be rounded up. So that's going to be 43 degrees and 49 minutes. And that's to the nearest minute. So with these questions, making sure that you put these into your calculator correctly. That's really the main thing here. Always write out your equation first. Write out the first step, what you're going to put into your calculator, before you then put it into your calculator and find your answer. Don't forget about your different types of rounding off. So when we're looking at angles, more often than not, we're going to be going with minutes, nearest minute or nearest degree. We're not going to be using many decimal places in these ones.